Okay, so have you ever actually stopped to think about the fluid pumping through your veins right this second? From the outside, human blood all looks exactly the same, right? Just a uniform, vibrant crimson. But down on a microscopic level, it is divided into these strict, completely incompatible factions. If you mix the wrong types together in a transfusion, your body's immune system will violently attack the new blood, which can literally be fatal. So why on earth would human biology create a system where our own blood can act as a deadly poison to one another? What ancient, microscopic secrets are hiding inside our veins?
Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are cracking open a biological cold case that has baffled the scientific community for well over a century. We're going to look way past the surface and investigate the deep evolutionary history of human blood. It is a wild story of survival, ancient pathogens, and a genetic mystery that connects us to some surprisingly distant ancestors.
To truly grasp the scale of this mystery, we have to radically shift our perspective. We need to zoom way in to the microscopic surface of a single red blood cell, and then zoom way out across a staggering timeline. We aren't just talking about some recent human mutation here. We are looking at a genetic legacy forged over 23 million years of invisible, microscopic battles against some of the deadliest diseases our planet has ever seen.
Section 1. Discovering the ABO system.
Right, let's jump back to the medical breakthrough that first brought this whole biological puzzle into the light. The year was 1900. An Austrian immunologist named Karl Landsteiner was conducting experiments, basically just mixing serum and red blood cells from different people. And he noticed something weird. Some of these mixtures caused the blood cells to clump together, a process called agglutination, while others didn't do anything at all. Through this, he discovered the ABO blood group system. It was a massive breakthrough that completely revolutionized transfusion medicine and actually earned him the Nobel Prize in 1930. Because honestly, before Landsteiner, blood transfusions were essentially a deadly game of roulette. He gave us the map to safely navigate blood compatibility. But the evolutionary why behind it all, that remained completely unknown.
Now, if we look at how these four primary phenotypes differ on a cellular level, it really comes down to specific carbohydrate antigens. Just think of them as tiny molecular ID tags sitting on the outside of your red blood cells. Type A and type B have specific sugar tags. Type AB has both of them, and type O lacks them entirely, expressing only a base precursor called the H antigen. Now, what if a person lacks even that H antigen? Well, that results in a remarkably rare anomaly known as the Bombay phenotype, which just proves how incredibly complex this biological system can be. But ultimately, it's these tiny molecules that dictate who can safely receive your blood and whose blood you can safely receive.
Section 2. The primate genetic connection.
But why do we even have this variation in the first place? To answer that, we have to step out of the modern hospital and travel deep into the evolutionary past. I mean, just how old do you think these blood types really are? For decades, scientists just assumed that human blood types were a relatively recent development. The old theory suggested that humans and other primates developed these blood types completely independently in recent evolutionary history, which is a process known as convergent evolution. And hey, it seemed like a logical assumption at the time. But modern genomic sequencing was about to turn that theory entirely upside down.
Because this timeline brilliantly illustrates just how deep our genetic history goes. When researchers finally analyzed the DNA of humans alongside 40 non-human species, including distantly related Old World monkeys and gibbons, they found something absolutely astonishing. The human A and B lineages are shared by descent. The exact same functional amino acid changes that separate type A and type B in humans are actually found in these other species too. Notice that while our globin genes diverged 500 million years ago, the ABO polymorphism emerged around 23 million years ago. We literally inherited our blood types from a distant, shared ancestor.
In genetics, this is called a trans-species polymorphism. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's an incredibly rare phenomenon where a genetic variation is maintained across distantly related species over millions of years. And here's the thing. Nature doesn't just hold on to genetic baggage for 23 million years by accident. The fact that these specific alleles have been actively maintained across so many different species tells us they must be serving a critical life-or-death purpose. Let's move to our next major revelation and see how this builds.
Section 3. The pathogen defense theory.
All right, enter the prime suspects in our evolutionary cold case: infectious diseases. Leading evolutionary theories suggest there's been a million-year arms race between pathogens and our blood types. Take blood type O, for example. It's globally the most common blood phenotype, and researchers hypothesize a fascinating evolutionary trade-off here.
Some theories propose that individuals with type O blood might actually have a lower risk of developing severe malaria from the Plasmodium falciparum parasite, mostly because the parasite struggles to cause infected red blood cells to clump together. That would be a massive survival advantage. But of course, nature demands balance. These same theories suggest type O individuals might face an increased severity of fluid loss if they contract cholera.
And it's definitely not just type O. Series also link blood type A to its own distinct evolutionary pressures. Evolutionary biologists propose that type A individuals might have an increased susceptibility to certain bacterial infections. For instance, the Helicobacter pylori bacteria, which is associated with a higher risk of gastric cancer, might actually have a selective advantage when infecting those with type A. So the overarching theory here is that in this microscopic biological war against pathogens, absolutely no single blood type offers a perfect, impenetrable shield.
Now, when you look at the global breakdown, you can see how these invisible pathogen pressures may have literally painted the genetic geography of human populations over millennia. Globally, type O averages around 39%. In places like Bhutan, we see a more even spread, with type O at 34.7% and type A at 32.3%, which reflects complex highland migration and diverse environmental pressures. But check out the Meso and South American native populations. They are overwhelmingly, greater than 90% blood type O. Scientists theorize that historical, localized pressures, perhaps devastating endemic diseases like malaria, ruthlessly sculpted these specific populations, heavily favoring the survival of those carrying the O allele.
Section 4. An unsolved evolutionary case. Real quick, before we hit that final mystery, I do want to mention a pretty interesting cultural phenomenon. Since the 1930s, particularly in Japan, a concept called ketsueki gata has popularized the idea that your blood type actually determines your personality. It claims type A's are organized, type O's are optimistic, that kind of thing. Let's be very clear here. This is total pseudoscience. It lacks empirical evidence and relies heavily on what psychologists call the Barnum effect, which is basically our tendency to accept vague, general statements as highly accurate descriptions of ourselves. It's a fun parlor trick, maybe good for a dating app bio, but the real science of blood types is infinitely more complex and fascinating.
So, we've got all these incredible clues, right? We understand the biochemistry, we can see the deep evolutionary timeline spanning 23 million years, and we can map the hypothesized survival advantages against malaria and vulnerabilities to cholera. But returning to that real biology, we hit a massive wall. Despite all our advanced genomic sequencing, I want you to hear this quote from a pivotal 2012 study by Seguirel and colleagues. The selection mechanism responsible for maintaining the ABO polymorphism across species remains unknown. Let that sink in. Unknown. Despite everything we just discussed, the exact overarching evolutionary mechanism that forced this genetic variation to survive for 23 million years across dozens of primate species is still ultimately an enigma. Malaria and cholera are definitely pieces of the puzzle, but they aren't the whole picture. Which leaves us with one final, honestly awe-inspiring thought. The blood flowing through you right now is practically a living fossil. It carries the molecular scars of 23 million years of survival. But the ultimate architect of this system, the ancient invisible selective pressures that forced our blood to divide into these incompatible tribes, is still out there in the dark, waiting to be found. What other ancient battles are recorded in our DNA? What mysteries are still hiding inside your veins? Thank you for watching this explainer, and keep questioning the